a little bit, but it's more the generalization.
Welcome. I'd like to call our meeting to order, and if everyone could please rise, we will ask our students to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. If we can remove our hats, that'd be great.
Charlie Ann will do it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, students, and welcome to everyone. The very first order of business is Sago Elementary School. Welcome to students and principal. Hello.
Hello. Hi, good evening, everybody. I am Chris Davis, the principal at Sago.
I do not mean to be rude to
No problem.
but
We need to approve
the agenda.
I hear a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hello.
Hello
Welcome,
again.
students and principal.
Thank you. Yes. Hi. Welcome. Welcome all of our guests as well. But I'm Chris Davis, the principal at Sago Elementary School, and I have 4 awesome 6th graders with me tonight who are going to talk to you about a program that is very unique to Sago Elementary called the Kokanee Hatchery Project, and I am going to let them introduce themselves to you.
I'm Victoria Baker. I'm Charlie Ann Jard.
I'm Dylan Pierce.
And I'm Landon Connor.
The history of the Sago Kokanee Hatchery was started in 2007 by Tim Hanna, a 4th grade teacher who co-founded the Kokanee Enhancement Project beginning in 1991. Tim was responsible for establishing partnerships between Idaho Fish and Game and LPOSD elementary schools to use hatcheries as a platform for project-based learning. Tim's enthusiasm for the outdoors and science education sparked a flame in the hearts and minds of his students and colleagues that still burns today throughout our community. Our Kokanee Hatchery is sponsored by Idaho Fish and Game and the Cabinet Gorge Hatchery. 5th graders are responsible for hatching and releasing 150 to 250 Kokanee salmon into Lake Pend Oreille every year. They learn about salmon species. You learn about salmon species native to the region, their life cycle, and human activities that have helped and hurt the population, such as when the brine shrimp were introduced, but they took up too much of the oxygen in Lake Pend Oreille, so they introduced the Kokanee salmon, but when the Kokanee salmon overpopulated, they had to release the Mackinaw, otherwise the lake trout, into Lake Pend Oreille to keep everything under control.
Here's how it works. In January, elementary schools in our school district participating in the Kokanee program, and our school is the only elementary school that did it last year and has been doing it, receive anywhere from 150 to 300 Kokanee eggs from Idaho Fish and Game's Cabinet Gorge Hatchery, depending on the harvest that year. The eggs are incubated in a 60-gallon tank at a temperature of 45 to 50 degrees and begin hatching in 2 to 3 weeks. February through May, we fed and monitored the Sago Hatchery daily, recording the tank temperature, water quality, and population changes in a log. Last one was what I thought was hardest. In June, the Kokanee are transported in a cooler of oxygenated water to a tributary of Lake Pend Oreille to be released. The final experience for students is a field trip to the Cabinet Gorge Hatchery the same day, where we get to see firsthand how hatcheries work on a much larger scale. We did not do this last year, however. Instead, we just explored the area.
This project taught us so much. First, it is project-based, very hands-on. Better than sitting in a classroom all day with teachers going yak, yak, yak. Next, we did a ton of self-reflections. Finally, we used critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Throughout the project, we did a lot of data collection. For example, you could see in the binder that we kept track of water temperature and quality and number of eggs. We discussed which stage the fish were in and
possible causes of death fish. Kokanee projects. We read about kokanee and learn key vocabulary associated with the fish and their habitat. We drew, colored, and labeled the life cycle of the kokanee. We created slideshows or other projects that demonstrated understanding of the life cycle. For example, we have the egg, the alvin, the fry, smolt, the adult, and then the spawners. Releasing the fish. In June, we released the kokanee fry into the stream that flows into Garfield Bay. When we released the fish, you could see all of the fry gathering where we had released them.
Okay, we're releasing the kokanee. We've had them in our hatchery at Sagal since January. And Wyatt just let 3 of them go. See where they go.
That one's swimming downstream.
You guys want to scoop them up? Alright, I'm taking a couple. The idea of releasing them in the creek is so they'll return to the creek when they spawn in 2 or 3 years when they're ready to spawn. They'll swim back to the same tributary that they were either hatched in or released in.
Spot here. Yeah, jump. Oh, there they go.
Yeah, there you go.
Keep on through.
Let the creek water come in there. Yeah, perfect. They don't want to go. There you go.
We had a blast exploring the bay. My favorite part was eating lunch by the lake and skipping rocks. When we skipped the rocks, after we had skipped the rocks, we were looking for where they had landed and see how far they had went. And when the rock had stopped moving, you could see all the fish moving, gathering to see what all the bubbles were. And that was super cool, seeing all the big fish gather.
If you've ever heard the saying, you have ants in your pants, well, when we had that field trip, a certain student in our class walked over and started kicking an anthill. So one of our teachers looked over and says, "What, you got ants in your pants?" And sure enough, he did. It's pretty hilarious.
Thank you.
Any questions?
This is so fun to see you guys present because I remember my kids were at the school when Tim Hanna started that program.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember it from when it was a baby egg. The program. Anyway, thank you guys. That was excellent. Thank you. Questions, anyone else? Lonnie's going to take the test and get that back.
Okay, good. I wondered if you would take that vocabulary. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, you guys can head on back. Yep.
Thank you, students.
Thank you, wonderful.
Dylan's ready to take those waders off. He's squeezing
Oh, yeah.
It's all good. You gotta look the part.
Yeah. 2 of them were waders.
Right.
Very impressed. Thanks, students. Okay. Okay, we gotta remember to give this back to them.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, hello again. Still Chris Davis, principal at Sagal Elementary. We are here this evening just to give a little bit of an overview and an update of our Sagal Parent Watch, which is a program that we are piloting this year for the district. I have 2 amazing integral folks in this program, Tara Lobb and Kyle Baker. And I'm going to kind of turn it over to Tara just to give you guys a little bit of a refresher on the conception of this program.
Hi. Last time I was here was about last year, and I spoke in front of you guys after the Uvalde shooting about district safety and security. After that, I was approached by Dr. Myers to be on the district security task force team, which I willingly said yes, yes, and yes. In the past, I've sat on 2 different builds, one out of Coeur d'Alene, one out of Hayden. And while I was on those teams, there was a lot of talk about a Watchdog Dads program. It's used nationally. A lot of school districts have it. I brought the idea to Miss Davis and Dr. Myers, and they thought that it sounded like a great program to bring on board. We asked for parents' feedback, and a lot of moms wanted to be on the team as well, and so that's where Parent Watch was born, to be able to encompass both moms, dads, guardians.
So we've already really seen some incredible benefits to this program. First and foremost, just having those extra eyes and ears, especially during those really heavily trafficked times. Our volunteers arrive right at 7:20 with our staff members, and we kind of divide and conquer with parent arrival, and then buses. And so just having them there to kind of greet and, you know, maybe see if there are any hazardous conditions. They can help us, you know, get the ice cleared already in the morning. Obviously, North Idaho, that's pretty much every day around here lately. And then also during passing times, we have littles that need a lot of support with their snow gear, and these volunteers have been very quick to pop in and support with that. And then, of course, I would say the most beneficial time is lunch and recess, and so they are willing to just kind of be out there monitoring, but also checking for hazardous conditions. Sagel's playground is very heavy with beautiful trees, but we oftentimes have limbs that are down, and so it's been great having them there just to kind of radio in. They all have walkie-talkies and let us know what's going on. And they're also patrolling and making sure that our doors are all locked and secure every day. And then we've also, at Sagel, we call it champions, but just having another trusted adult for, you know, our kiddos to connect with, and if they're having some struggles, it's one more person that they can go to. You'll see something a little later in our presentation. Next steps. So I brought Kyle with tonight, so he's our model, but you can see, number one, we really want to have a vest that allows for these volunteers to be very noticeable, not just to our students, but to our staff members. And so Kyle is helping us get these vests, but they've got lots of fun little pockets for walkie-talkies. You can kind of share.
Several everyday things. Obviously, a lot of us wear glasses. I have a glasses case, water bottle, notebook, pens, first aid kit. Honestly, the list goes on and on. There's all kinds of stuff that can go in here. Some of the best stuff for safety. I mean, that's what we're after. So identification badge, all volunteers must have this. It's another one of the requirements. And then a name tag. Honestly, mine is all personalized. This was a quick conception of the program. I have other people that can do all this stuff, so naturally I went and did it. So this was just to get it kicked off and get it going. I also wanted something comfortable, durable. We're obviously with a bunch of kids, a bunch of safety issues, you're rubbing up against doors all the time, so something that wasn't going to rip, you know, something very nice.
And they're adjustable,
So,
extra small.
fully adjustable. They go from extra small up to 3X, full adjustable here, and on the shoulders.
And we love too that every school can kind of customize it. So we're the Sagel Hawks, but any school obviously could make this a little bit more of their own. So that's one of the big ones. We're also revising the daily schedule pretty much every day, and we're doing that based on feedback from our staff, but also the volunteers. So we've got those critical times where we're finding we really need those extra adults, but there's also a little bit of downtime. I'm not gonna lie, like the hour, you know, from like 12 to 1:15, it's a little slow. And we want these volunteers to come and really feel like their time is being spent, you know, to the best of their ability. And so we're just really kind of tweaking that. Right now, when a volunteer wants to come to participate in this program, they call our main office and talk to one of our administrative assistants, which is great, it's working, but we anticipate this program's really gonna take off a little bit more. And so finding an efficient system, maybe done electronically, like a sign-up genius, is our next step. So the amazing Tara is all over that and working with our district technology department to get that up and running, hopefully very soon. And then last but not least, some de-escalation training. So these folks are already having to deal with some little minor crises, and so it'd be nice if we could show a video, you know, as part of our orientation process that just gives some little tricks and tips for them to intervene in the event that they're dealing with a bullying situation or something, you know, that time in between the incident and when a staff member can assist. So that's coming up soon too. And then just a few testimonials. I mentioned before just that trusted adult, that champion. I have one of our volunteers, and she came to me and told me this story, but she overheard one of our 6th graders talking about how he's just feeling very bullied and doesn't have a whole lot of friends. And so she went over, introduced herself, and just kind of, you know, hit it off with this kiddo and encouraged him to come and see our school counselor, which he did. But she also did come in and check with me to make sure that, you know, this kid was being taken care of. And every single time she comes back, she goes and finds this particular young man. So it's just been super cool to see that. Of course, everybody feels safe when Mr. Baker is at Sagal. How can you not? And then just, you know, another testimonial from a kiddo is that they like having that extra help at recess, especially being somebody who can, you know, help with football. We always need an extra referee, so they have fun doing that as well. So hopefully we'll add to those testimonials as the program continues. And really, Tara and Kyle and I are just here to answer any other questions that you may have.
So what's the screening process for parents? Or is just if you're a parent, you're in the program, or is there any?
Yes, it's the same process that we use for volunteers in our schools. So they have to come, they fill out a form initially, I review it, I sign it, I send it off, district, you know, takes care of that part, and then we do have them go for fingerprinting and background checks.
And this has to be a parent or guardian with a student at our school. It is not allowed to be anything in the community other than that.
Right. So a lot of our volunteers are already parents that are super involved in the school.
Exactly.
But you know, we have had some new ones, and it's been really neat.
And we have an police officer that sits on the team as well. He wasn't able to make it tonight, but he does sit on the team and he does give his opinions on all of this, and that's where the vest came, where these are custom made vests. It's not a color that you can just go get. It's not something that somebody can go get. So
that's great.
Yeah, we've worked really tight with Bonner County Sheriff's Office to ensure that they're a part of everything and
they're aware.
Everybody's identifiable.
Yeah.
That's the reason behind the bright colors.
Show them the back.
I didn't show them the back.
In the back also.
Very nice.
Yes. I just want to thank publicly Tara. You know, when she was here, I'd just been hired, but I hadn't even started yet, and she did a talk. You were all here, and I went and just approached her afterwards. What follow through to show the public that one person can make a difference, a truly committed person can make a difference. She has come, except for a couple of meetings, she's come to every single, remember we were meeting once a week for at least 2 hours for several months. TJ Clary also is here from Southside, and Crosby from the district. TJ's come every time as well. But what a difference. One adult that really truly cares can make a difference. This whole thing has started, and she's made a huge difference at Sagal and the district. And this is a pilot, and it can go to every other school after this. So I would just like to give her a round of applause for being here.
Are there other questions? I appreciate you coming and sharing that with us, and you kind of made me tear up again.
So it takes a very scary, you know, subject and makes it a little bit more, you know, inspirational and positive. So yeah, I think it's really cool to watch.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and we're moving on. We have our superintendent report. Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Welcome.
Thank you to all the parents who brought their kids tonight too. I really appreciate it, and everyone from Sagal who was here to support them. Thank you. Thank you. It's an extra thing for parents, and I appreciate it because it's great for the board to see what the students are really doing. So my January report to the board. As a reminder, my 5 goals, I actually spoke this morning at the Ponderay Rotary, and I went through by memory the 5 goals in the transition plan and kind of did an update for them and let them know. So anyone who's been here every month already knows this, but just a little bit of a change from the beginning of the year is that we are having a community feedback forum on January 12th. So we're going to have just our overall themes. We've had the leadership teams look through them, and I would like to have the public be able to have a second opportunity to come and say what, based on all 994 responses and the themes that have come out of that, we're looking at 4 to 5, and I'd like them to be able to see that and give some feedback before we finalize the first iteration to go to the board. That's this Thursday, January 12th at the district office. I'm sure you all received a cute little invite. Thank you to Kristen Hawkins, our community relations liaison, via email and text. Then the draft after that input will be in the end of the month January loop, so people can look at that and still continue to give feedback. And then I will prepare that with everyone's feedback to have that first iteration to you at the February board meeting. You'll have a month to look at that, ask questions, and then you'll have March. You may certainly have more questions and want to talk more. Either in March or April would be my hope that you would approve the final 5-year strategic plan. And then we'll be able to publish it with our patrons and our community and finalize that in June. So before school is out, folks know where we're headed for the next school year. Perfect. There's a copy of the cute little invite. And speaking of District Safety Task Force, it's real quick this month. The Parent Watch program is part of that presentation. But I wanted to know, as of this morning, I wanted you to know Sandpoint High School and Sandpoint Middle School are operational. This is what it looks like. Press here. This is the little video camera. Here's where you, if you're a staff person, you would put in your, we don't have those finalized yet, but I just would like to really give kudos to, I know not anyone's here except for TJ, but the District Safety Task Force, and Kelly is on it as well as parent and employee. Where we thought this was going to be in our 3rd year, remember this, these controlled access, we're going to be in our mid-year range goals, which would be 3 years out. And now, thank you to Matt Deal, and thank you to our technology, Matt Brass, and thank you to all the District Safety Task Force team. This is now installed and ready to go at Sandpoint High School and Sandpoint Middle School. This is a huge kudos for our community and for our schools. And it doesn't slow us down getting in, but it really helps control the access, which is a #1 thing in safety. So, good job on that. My 4th goal is unfinished learning. We are going to assess and address what were the unfinished learning gaps. Well, the good news is we're right in the mid-winter block of doing assessment, so we can see from fall to the mid-year, where are we, and gathering that data. And we are assessing that. PLCs are working hard at addressing what are those gaps and how are we addressing those. And then the wonderful Andra and Casey will be presenting to the board after we complete that window. They'll be presenting at the March board meeting, so you'll know where we've come so far partway through the year. And then we'll again, at the end of the year, do another report to the board. And then my last goal is always the comprehensive and collaborative communication. This is our December loop that you can link to. This will also be up on the website. I will point out that I did do another video. I do not like myself on video, but for some reason people like the videos, so we did do another video this month. And you can see that in the top of it. I'm not going to play this because it's about 4 minutes, but if you had not had the opportunity to look at this, I'd encourage you. This is a great medley. Every single school is represented in folks, students and staff, and what they're doing over break to look forward to. And a big, huge thank you to our community relations liaison for splicing that all together, and it's really uplifting. Very well watched in the loop are the videos. So I think the people are telling us that's what they like to see is the videos. And so I'm just going to keep doing those lovely videos. Thank you. Any questions? It's a short one this month.
No. Anyone else?
Questions? All right.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And at this time, we are going to move on. Sorry, I lost my place in my computer. At this time, we have public comment, and I would just remind everyone that the Board of Trustees welcomes patron comments from the community. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person and must be appropriate for open forum. Input must not identify individual personnel or students or be abusive, defamatory, or obscene. This is a board meeting held in public, not a public board meeting, as governed by Idaho Code 33, Section 5, so no discussion or responses can occur during the meeting. Issues may be referred to the proper staff person or committee for follow-up. And I would just like to, well, we only have one, Kristen Dodd. She knows this format well. Welcome.
Hi, Kristen.
It's been a while.
Hey, that.
Yeah.
I'm Kristen Dodd. I have a 15-year-old in Sandpoint High, and Dr. Meyer, I know that we haven't been acquainted. I used to come to these a lot. I've been a couple times this year, sat in the back, but haven't been as vocal. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself. The reason I wanted to talk today, I actually wanted to come to the last month meeting to say some of this stuff, but I was sick. So I wanted to say thank you. Well, for one, I want to say thank you for the added emails and text communications, and I do like your videos. It does make me feel more included and informed as a parent compared to the past. So I think that is a very nice improvement. Also, I wanted to say thank you for addressing some of the CRT issues in curriculum, and I would encourage that to continue. I've had some concerns about what's called social emotional learning. It's not all bad or anything, but I think that there is some CRT peppering, and I also think that we have to be careful not to replace what should be handled by the parents with curriculum, with like psychological issues. I mean, we have to, it's kind of a fine line there, and I just want to encourage more research, more looking into that, and just really be looking closely and examining some of that curriculum and continue to try and weed out that CRT, because I know it's still there. I mean, it's not, maybe not obvious to everybody, but I've seen some of it myself. And one specific piece of material that was being used in the classroom was that Hell Below Deck book, and I took a big time issue with that, and so I had a little bit something to do with that being brought to the attention of others, and so I just want to say thank you for removing that and for addressing it, and so I just encourage more of that. The tables are arranged differently. I just wanted to say, you're talking away from us, so I don't know, just consider, it's hard to hear sometimes back there. So I like to hear what all the trustees are saying during the meeting. What I was going to say, I was also going to mention something about you being added to the transition committee. Just curious if we'll be kept in the loop about what, I don't know what that entails, and I think you did maybe mention a little bit about what that entails, but just, I'd be interested to stay informed on how that goes forward and what your involvement is. Maybe, I don't know if what's discussed during those meetings is public knowledge, but I'm curious about it. And then also I wanted to mention something about the TA periods for the students. I know that, I think this has maybe been brought up before, but I think there was a shortage of availability of certain classes or enough classes for students, and so there were a lot of students that got thrown into TA periods. Okay, so I just wanted to say I hope that's being looked at, and also if they are going to be in their TA periods, I've addressed this with the teachers as well, just so you know, but if they're going to be in the TA periods, I want to make sure the student is actually working on schoolwork or something that is applicable to that TA class, because my student has admitted to wandering the hallways and doing things they're not supposed to be doing. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And we will move right on to our financial update. We have Chief Finance and Operations Officer, Lisa Halls. Welcome.
Good evening. These lecterns aren't meant for people even in cowboy boots that are 5'2". Just realizing this after all this time.
We could get a stool.
So good evening. Tonight I want to touch on 3 different items. The first, we are now 6 months into our fiscal year 23, and just give the board a budget to actual update. Second, I want to briefly discuss and prepare the board for what the LPOSD fiscal year 24 budget process will look like as it unfolds in the next 6 months. And third, I want to concentrate on the first week and a half, or not even half a week, but really the first week and a half of the state of Idaho's 2023 legislative session. So first item, the first 6 months of this fiscal year 23. The capital projects that have been completed, most notably our child nutrition warehouse, but there have been a handful of others, really came in with no significant change orders. However, the largest suite of projects, which are our HVAC projects, will the work will be done in the summer of 2023. The second item is in terms of student enrollment. We discussed in September that we budgeted on what's called units, 196 units, and our midterm actual units now are finalized, and they're 196.66, which is good news. This drives about 75% of the state's annual appropriation to school districts. And our state appropriation represents about 2/3 of our general fund revenues. The other major revenue source is our indefinite term property tax levy. And of course, there are 2 spike payments, one in August, the second in February, and I don't expect any variance over what we levy. There are some unbudgeted expenses to focus on enhanced safety and security. Dr. Meyer and the team have reported out to you that we've put in place the Raptor system, which was $20,000, and this keyless entry system. So far, we've expended $47,000. I think there are some other work to still do on the keyless entry system. The district is also discussing potentially buying before spring break what they call white buses, which are smaller buses to transport students related to extracurricular activity versus using either a yellow bus or a contracted coach system. And we're looking probably to buy used white buses, and I think the price range is quite large. Those researching that tell me somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000 per bus. But really the biggest financial variance has to do with our free and reduced numbers. And our free and reduced numbers have not been collected for applications since fiscal year 1920. Why is that? Because there was universal free breakfast and free lunch for 2 years for all school districts in the nation. And that ended on June 30th of 2022. And so now our school district, as with all other school districts, we have collected our free and reduced applications, and we, compared to 1920, where our percentage was 37.59, it's dropped by about 6%. The December count is 31.62. Or overall, that's a 16% drop. So why is that significant? What's the impact? It's multi-pronged on the financial side. First, we participate in the FCC's E-rate grant program, which is meant to enhance communication in public school districts and libraries nationally, and we have always been in the discount rate of 70%, which meant the grant picked up 70% of the cost. The major communication item for our school district is our wide area network, and so with this drop in the free and reduced percent, we will now go to the next lower tier of reimbursement, which is 60%, which is already in next year an additional $46,000 in cost. We have a multi-year contract for a wide area network. Next, this year in our state K-12 appropriation, for the first time since I've been here, and I do believe the first time for K-12 in Idaho, there's a line item that's directly tied to free and reduced percentages and for our K through 3 students. This is the literacy line item that got a major boost from fiscal year 22 to 23. And so we had budgeted a $550,000 increase to that line item, and the variance to the negative because of our drop in free and reduced is almost $400,000. The third is our child nutrition program, which operates on paper at an operational deficit, and we had budgeted a transfer into the child nutrition program, and now we're projecting we're going to have to transfer just operationally another $100,000. But of course I would remind the board and the public that this is the only program we have that has a direct revenue stream. So other programs operate at high deficit sort of spending level on paper, probably most notably our special education program. So why are our numbers dropping? I'm not an economist, I'm not a demographer, I would never purport to be, but we do know that the free and reduced percentage, of course, pivots on what the federal government defines as poverty, and that poverty, and our child nutrition director could probably rattle that off the top of your head, and I can't, and she's here if you need to know that. But those free and reduced numbers are also tied to our Title I, outside our largest federal grant outside of the child nutrition, Title II, and Title VI-B, and these numbers hold. Our appropriations for next year will be predicated on this poverty measurement, and as much as maybe cut in half. Linda Westfall, who is the state of Idaho's child nutrition director. So now the September 22 statewide data is coming in. There's several months lag, and she has shared, I've talked to her several times, that in our state that the free and reduced percentages are down about 10%. So we're 16%, but we're not one, the state's not one, and we're 16. And then she's also quick to point out that the number of meals nationwide has dramatically dropped by about 2% from the 1920 year. Then the final point on budget to actual for this year, of course, we talked kind of at length about using our federal COVID relief dollars, our final package, which we are basically spending down in fiscal year 23. We're going to supplant about $2.6 million, which we will add to our general fund reserves. So with all the things I've just delineated for you, we started our fund balance this year with $14.5 million, and we'll add probably about $2 million to that, so that expressed in terms of percentage to our expenditures for the year will end the year at about 40%. And then of course strategically moving forward, our plan is to start spending that down to keep our indefinite term supplemental levy at $12.7 million. Then if I transition to Lake Pend Oreille School District's budget process and what the board can expect, in mid-November, administration tasked all the program directors to develop their budget requests. So they've had 2 months to do that, and will present to myself, the superintendent, and the 2 directors of teaching and learning starting tomorrow, and then culminating next Friday. Concurrent to that work, we also have a small budget, we call it the Small Budget Committee, for lack of a better title, which represents all categories of staff. That's chaired by me, and the task of that committee is to present a balanced budget to the superintendent before spring break. So in the March meeting, you will hear a financial overview from me. In your April meeting, we will present, superintendent and myself, a draft budget for fiscal year 24. In the May meeting, we'll come back with any revisions or hopefully answering any questions the board had. And then the adoption is the June meeting. I just would caution that if there are a lot of questions in the May presentation, that we may have to have a second special board meeting in April to meet the publishing deadline and just the administrative work to get the budget actually into the accounting system after the May meeting. And then the final time tonight I wanted to spend on the Idaho legislative session. The first 2 weeks of the Idaho session is especially important to my work as the CFO portion of my job in trying to project revenues that will come into our district, as well as gauge what the K-12 appropriation for the next fiscal year will be like. And I can't tell you how much time I spend listening to committee meetings these first 2 weeks of the session in particular. So I want to talk about 2 joint legislative committees at the state level. The first is called the CEC, or the Change in Employee Compensation. In Idaho Code, the mission for this committee is to set fair compensation recommendation for state employees. They work with the Division of Human Resources, State Division, and they last Wednesday had their first meeting and have made a recommendation of an 8.5% increase for state employees over 2 years. For fiscal year 24, 4% increase, and for fiscal year 25, a 4.5% increase, with police getting actually a considerably higher recommended increase. And then they'll make their final recommendation to the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee and finish their work on January 18th. So why is this prescient? The state is the largest employer in the state, and what kind of wages state employees are earning will, in already a very tight labor market, will absolutely, funnel through the state economy. It also, for me, in my opinion, and why I particularly watch it year over year, is it sets kind of the baseline low watermark for what I think is going to happen in the K-12 appropriation. Generally, our appropriation, the percentage is higher. Of course, these are real dollars that go to state employees in terms of percentage, and with the state appropriation, it goes through the funding formula, which is fundamentally different. The second joint committee is called the Economic Outlook and Revenue Assessment Committee, and they're charged with looking at the current fiscal year, final revenue projections, but more importantly, the next fiscal year's general fund revenue forecast. They had 2 full days, 8-hour days last Thursday and Friday, of basically presentations from economists and the major industries in Idaho, coupled with Idaho State Tax Commission, the Idaho Association of Taxpayers. And what they will finish their forecast this Thursday and present in terms of a resolution to JFAC on Friday morning what their forecast is. Then the final committee that I pay a lot of attention to, that's also a joint committee, and then their work's done, is the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee. They started their work this morning, and their job is to listen to all 108 agency budget requests over the next 6 weeks, and then recommend an appropriation for each agency. So our agency, K-12, that budget will be heard on January 25th, and then they'll start budget setting on February 21st. So the Economic Outlook Committee gives 1 revenue forecast. That's the first of 3. JFAC gives another revenue forecast. That's the second of 3, and they will start that work this Friday and will finish it next week. Then the third and final forecast comes from the Division of Financial Management. That's the governor's office. And he started the legislative session yesterday with his State of the State. His forecast in terms of general fund revenues next year will be a decrease of 5.5%. And you might be scratching your head, why would that be a decrease when, Idaho's economy is robust? We're still the fastest growing state in the nation for the 6th consecutive year. Outside of what now, at least in presentations, is sort of a projections of sort of a milder recession starting in third quarter of 23 and maybe lasting 9 months to a year, and high inflation. It's pretty uniquely tied to the 2-day special session September 1st and 2nd, which I reviewed with you, and where now $410 million of the state's second largest revenue source, sales tax, will be carved out into higher ed and K-12. K-12 will receive ongoing $330 million new dollars in a new designated fund called the Public School Income Fund. That's one. And then the second reason is now for the third consecutive year we've had major income tax reductions in the corporate and the individual income tax, with the latest going into effect, say the 10 days ago. So I want to hand out at a high level an overview of what the governor presented compared to Superintendent Critchfield's budget request that will come before JFAC on the 25th of January. This budget is 70 pages long, and I've only
You pared it down for us.
pared it down to the summary page and then some of the most important things in terms of money, or in terms of shift in policy plank is, I guess, the way I'm going to say. All right, so how to read this. This is the first column is our appropriation for this fiscal year, $3.3 billion. Noticing that $871 million is federal dollars. The second column is Superintendent Critchfield's budget request, which has not been presented yet. And you'll see it's $3.3 billion, or $2.6 billion of basically general and dedicated revenue sources, for an increase of 8.5%. So that's up from what UBERA presented or delivered on September 1st of 2022 of 6.9%. And then the third column is the governor's recommendation for K-12, $3.5 billion, or 2.8 million in general and dedicated funds, for an increase of just shy of 9%. And I've highlighted the dedicated funds if you would attenuate to the fact that the governor is asking for $426 million in dedicated funds. So this is very different, of course, than Superintendent Critchfield, which is asking for $126 million. Then other things to understand about this budget review is under the section that says distribution, statutory requirements. That's just what it is. It's in statute, and it will remain in the K-12 budget unless for some reason it was eliminated. And really the big difference between, there aren't huge differences between the governor's request and the superintendent's request. I've also highlighted the $72 million in literacy. You'll notice that it's stable from requests from fiscal year 23. So that dollar amount has been ramped up over the last several appropriation cycles, and this is the first time it stays at a level request. And then the next section, lines 22 through 33, are the non-statutory. It means every fiscal cycle they would go away unless they were reappropriated. And the biggest variance between Critchfield's request and Governor Little is pre-COVID, there were reductions in technology, content and curriculum, and professional development, and she's actually her request is bringing them back up to what they were before they were cut. And then the final thing I've highlighted is under estimated support units, and you'll see that both the governor and the superintendent have 17,278, and I'll explain why I've highlighted that when we go forward. So on the next page, it shows you that the governor and Superintendent Critchfield are following the CEC's recommendation of a 4% increase for certified administrators. On the next page, on the number 660 is something that is very different between the superintendent's request and the governor's request. Governor is out of these dedicated funds. In other words, this new money through the sales tax sharing, through the Idaho income, what is it called? The Public School Income Fund. He wants to spend or recommends spending basically $145 million of those dollars. He mentioned in his State of the State that every teacher in Idaho would then receive an increase in salary of $6,359. I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. This is based on what's called the career ladder, which is how money flows in the state funding formula. It's an allocation of how teachers are paid, and it's those rungs he's recommending are increased. This does not mean that teachers in Idaho are going to receive a $6,000 increase next year. On the next page, the third category of staff, so we talked about certified administrators, teachers. The third category are classified staff, and again, the governor is recommending the CEC's 4% increase for classified. However, on the next page under item 8, the governor also is recommending tapping into this new public school income fund of about $100 million to increase the amount of dollars per qualifying classified position through the funding formula. There's been a lot of discussion that right now as we sit here, the state basically pays 40 cents per every $1 spent on classified staff. There was an interim committee that made this recommendation, and he is including that in his request, and that is different than the superintendent, which is asking for 7.5% increase for classified staff. Then under number 10, the CEC also committee makes a recommendation on the health insurance for the state employees, and that would go up by about 10%, or another $1,250. And then on the final page, number 24, is this big shift in policy. So this reads that the governor wants to remove enrollment-based funding. We are in enrollment-based funding through a temporary rule from the State Board of Education this year. What's in statute is to pay school districts on average daily attendance, which is on average is about 5% less than for any district enrollment. For our school district this year, if we were to compare enrollment to average daily attendance, we are generating about 10 more units, or $1.2 million more in revenue to being paid on enrollment. What's more important is a provision in the funding formula called protection, which says if your student count, I'm just going to express it that way at the moment, your student count drops by more than 3% from the prior year, you'll be funded up to 97% of your prior year unit count. So if we were to click forward to November of 23 and we reverted to average daily attendance, more than half of the school districts, including ours, would fall into protection, and including all of the largest districts. And it's self-funded, which means whatever that variance is spread out in all the districts. This is not new because we were in a position before when the first year when the state board put a temporary rule in, there's a lot of education on first with the governor's office and then with the legislature, the impact of that. So that's one, and I can't quantify that right now. Several years ago, myself and one other CFO from Boise spent a lot of time quantifying it. Several years ago, for us, the impact would have been between $2.5 and $3 million for our district alone. This is an enormous move on the governor's part. He did last session, 2 days before the session ended, he vetoed the bill that would have shifted our state to be paid on enrollment. So it's not out of his previous action. But if we go back to the first page, under where our estimated support unit count, you notice that the superintendent's unit count and the governor's unit count are identical. And reading through this and in what I had understood, the superintendent's request would be for the legislature to move to being paid on enrollment. And I have reached out to Critchfield's staff. They're still working on understanding the unit number that is presented in this request. Then the other, I talked about this public school income fund. The governor, of course, is substantively has his recommendations of how a good portion of that money would be spent next fiscal year. But you also have what's called the K-12 Facility Committee that met 6 times. The last meeting was December 22nd, and they're not introducing bills from that committee. They're not doing an executive summary, but they are doing a summary, and the things that I think that are going to be, having listened to those committee meetings, are tapping into the state endowment fund from anywhere from 61 million up to over 100 million, and also tapping into this public income fund. You also have the Idaho Association of Administrators working with the Idaho Association of School Business Officials to come up with their priorities and perhaps how these ongoing funds would be spent. So there's a lot of work on my side to try to project revenue and a lot of listening, and this variable of this new sales tax off the top, along with just all the things that are happening in the economy, is making it interesting work.
Well,
that's my prepared remarks. Do you have any questions?
I appreciate your thoroughness in listening to the really stimulating committee meetings. And I know we'll hear back on it when you start to present budget planning for next year, because it will all be embedded in what we're doing going forward. So I appreciate the overview up front. And thank you for presenting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Lisa.
Well, we have some board action items, and the first one is for me to dissolve the current Board of Trustees as it sits right now. And with that, I will turn over the meeting to our superintendent. I'm in charge now.
Here.
Yeah. Turn in your name tags.
I am calling for nominations for board chairman.
I would like to nominate Geraldine Lewis for board chair. You're welcome.
Are there any other nominations?
I bet you can win this one.
The clerk of the board will take a roll call vote from the first nominee. Please state yay or nay. The first nominee with the majority vote is elected. Geraldine Lewis.
Trustee Peters.
Yes.
Trustee Sherman.
Yes.
Trustee Decker.
Yes.
Trustee Williams.
Yay.
Trustee Lewis.
Yes. Thank you.
Trustee Geraldine Lewis is elected board chair. Now I'm handing over the meeting back over to the board chair, Lewis.
It was brief, but
job.
you did a good job. And actually, at this point, I will hear nomination for vice chair. Open that up.
I nominate Ronnie Williams.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Okay, at this time, we will take a roll call vote again to,
Roll call vote. Trustee Peters.
Yes.
Trustee Sherman.
yay,
Trustee Decker.
Yes.
Trustee Williams.
Yay.
Chair Lewis.
yes. Thank you. Vice Chair. So we will now have appointment of treasurer and clerk. Can I do these together? No. Okay, so I need a motion from a trustee to appoint our treasurer, and then it would have to be seconded.
I make a motion to appoint Valerie Corsiglia as treasurer.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Oh, I'm seeing if it's a roll call. Roll?
No.
It's not. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And then we will have appointment of clerk. I'll hear a motion for that.
I make a motion to appoint Kelly Fisher clerk of the board.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Appointment, we have 3 authorized agents. We'll hear a motion to appoint 3 authorized agents. Anyway.
I make a motion to appoint Dr. Becky Meyer, Lisa Halls, and Kelly Fisher as authorized agents for the Lake Pond School District.
I second if it needs one.
It does. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And an appointment of custodian of records.
I make a motion to appoint Kelly Fisher as the custodian of records.
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, I rushed through this discussion on that. And so we have code of ethics. We were presented with each of those. You've seen them before. And I'll entertain a motion to approve the code of ethics as presented.
I make a motion to approve the code of ethics as presented.
I second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And we have a motion. You all saw the calendar, the meeting locations and dates for the future year 23-24. I'll hear a motion to approve that.
I make a motion to approve the 2023 board calendar and locations as presented.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that calendar, locations? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And I am catching up. Here we are, a notice of posting locations. You've also seen those. We will be approving those. I'll hear a motion for that.
I make a motion to approve the notice of posting locations.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we have the second reading of policy. Who's presenting on the second reading for this
This was
one.
presented last time. We
Yep.
added the designee so that I could accept grants and donations and gifts.
Yep.
And so there was no feedback from last time, so should be good to go if it's okay with the board.
Yep, I'm sure you all recall this one. Is there any other? I'll entertain a motion for this.
I make a motion to adopt the revisions to policy 4500, grants, public gifts, donations to the schools and district.
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And we have an alternate authorization, teacher to new for Kelly McDonald.
I make a motion to approve the alternate authorization teacher to new for Kelly C. McDonald.
I second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that one? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And our last action item, we have discussion on public comment format. So as you all just witnessed, we had a public comment format that's in a policy right now that it's been included in your packet for review, that follows the format you just saw happen right here in our meeting, where somewhere at the beginning of our meeting, often after presentations, but before we get into any action items, there's public comment. As you read in 4105, it's outlined there what we follow here. The background on why this format discussion is here is because when we had done a little bit of board training, it was brainstormed about, should we change that format up? Should we look at different options? And so it's just here as a possible. There's obvious options to leave it as is, to change it, to have discussion on it, even to table it if we don't come up with any specifics. So I open it up for discussion.
The thinking, I think, as far as the idea, and you guys can shoot it down and make other suggestions, was that leave the possibility for the public to make a statement or a comment on agenda items that maybe something has come up that they know about, or in their research after they hear us discuss, that they can, obviously there's no engagement, but they can then give a quick 2-minute or whatever comment on an agenda item that maybe they didn't have in their mind at the very beginning of the meeting, to give them a time, an opportunity. I heard that from constituents, like, oh, once I heard the board discussing, I was like, wow, I wish I could have said this or that, but at that time it's too late, especially on, maybe we modify it to where it's only on voting agenda items, so it's not open for everything, only things that maybe we're voting on, so we can maybe hear input if there is before we vote. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It would be like we flew through these action items because they're pretty slam dunk.
Because each one of those would be a voting item.
It's pretty, yeah.
I see.
But
well,
so I mean, there's certain times where it would just be flat out cumbersome. It'd just be like,
Could potentially.
Did we ever exceed the total time allotted for public comment?
when we have 10
Yeah.
speakers, it happened many times during some of our more
Hell.
during
Yes.
during several yes,
someone had to say it.
It did happen quite.
So I guess my first part would be, I think it's really critical that we have that strong public support. That's one of the ways that I measure the success of our board. So just as a point of reference, it does says total time allotted for public comment will not exceed 30 minutes. I know that our time is really valuable, especially, I was asking earlier, you know, Dr. Meyer and Kelly, they've been up since 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. on school business. And so just looking at your time, I'm willing to sit here until midnight but I don't think you should have to spend 24 hours here. So, but I would suggest maybe we look at that 30 minutes and say, maybe extend that right there to allow an hour max. Again, I don't know. If there's something super contentious.
One chunk or like?
One chunk up front, because then it would be at least there. We wouldn't have to cut people off if we have 20 people, let's say for 3 minutes. We wouldn't have to say, oh, only half the people can speak, because I do want to make sure we have that, again, that input at that time. So we have a forum set up to do that. It wouldn't put us here till midnight, it would only extend it by a half hour, right? So that would be the first, just as looking at the document that we have, if we were to make a change to add it there. That was the first one. I want to make sure that the time is constructive, that we're not being constrictive, but yet really looking at the value of information and the timeliness.
Could we, is it too much to in the wording of our policy to say 30 minutes for non-agenda items at the beginning and then leave an extra whatever 30 minutes allotted for the other parts, like within the agenda items? You know what I'm saying? To where it kind of separates it out, or is that too complicated?
I think you can do it either way. I think the decision needs to be made on whether or not we want to, even if we want to go down that road of having the ability for public to have another comment period outside of, hey, this is just normal, regular public comment. I want to, say this or that about the school. If it's an agenda item, like, do you loop back around to that? I think that needs to be, that's the crux of this discussion, I think.
Well, and that could be something that if somebody starts to speak on an agenda item, we could, is it too much to then just hold them till that agenda item comes back around?
But what if that's the same person then potentially speaking multiple times? My concern was making sure that each person was heard. That's why I was thinking of having it at the front end. It wouldn't be one person speaking on each item, potentially.
I would like to clarify one thing. When we have hot button topics where we're going to have 20 people interested in speaking, I'm hoping we recognize that, hey, this is we need a public meeting on a community meeting on this topic. So that this is, we're talking about our meetings that are running regular business. I can't see us having just getting sidewinded with 20 people coming to speak with us on a general meeting. So I would hesitate to change the policy and then find ourselves in these really sort of bogged down meetings. I would remind the trustees that you're elected to represent almost 5,000 voters, not 20 people. And you're elected to be a rational voice of reason with this entire body of voters behind you saying, I've given you my vote. That's why this is a meeting between us. And the reference, the table's a little closer, is because when we were just spread out in a line, we didn't have any sense of interaction with each other, in the sense that, hey, we're supposed to be interacting and dialoguing here as a team and making decisions representing the huge number of voters. So yes, the community has input. It may be that their input is, where is it appropriate to get that input? May not be at every general meeting, because I would hate to see us not be able to actually accomplish what we're elected to accomplish, which is the action of the board.
And that's why I think it's cumbersome, might be more cumbersome to have it interspersed throughout it. There's a lot more to
It's definitely more complicated to try and manage.
What do you think the chances are, of somebody actually having something, though? I would rather create the opportunity, like over-promise, under-deliver kind of idea, like have the opportunity for somebody to share, and chances are we probably won't have by the time.
I don't know how it's worked in other...
or what if we were to limit the public speaking time per agenda item, like a 6-minute cap or something, and 2 minutes per person, so only 3 people max.
I know, but there's 12. What's A through M? There's that many
A through M. Oh.
action items. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but no one's going to
Creating
talk
a
about the clerk. I mean,
I
unless
get
we're
it,
going to
creating
come
a
up here and tell
policy.
everybody how great she is. Like
Creating
that.
a
We might
policy
get
around
20 people, right? But
inviting public comment before every action item is problematic in that sense. Because then, where do you sift it out?
It's also important, like, I understand, especially Tanya, what you're saying, like having everybody heard.
I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying what is most logical, having somebody be able to do multiple times and multiple people throughout the whole meeting. I feel like that's a lot of stop and start.
Yeah.
Where if we're looking for a way to, again, have people have comment and having people have that opportunity, and I'm hearing that in the past there may not have always been those opportunities up front with 3-minute limit per person seems more constructive for holding a business meeting. But I completely am in agreement with, you know, I think that is this the right time for getting public input? There's a lot of pieces to that as well. And I, again, would like to thank Dr. Meyer and Kelly administratively, because I think that those stakeholder forums, the curriculum committees, this Thursday, that you're opening that up and we're really making an effort to have more of those constructive times where we're really seeking that input so that it's not necessarily here. But again, there are, like today, the safety parent, that came from this meeting. So somebody walking in who may not have reached out to one of us in that forum, it was super constructive, and we don't in any way want to lose those opportunities. So, and that meeting may not have been tied to something, but there's somebody who had a great idea and wanted to share it and has had a huge impact. And I just think that that's very valuable. But you're right, so you're balancing that constructive in the timing.
One of the things that I've noticed in public comment is it is often based on what's on our agenda, which is posted 48 hours earlier.
Yeah.
So public comment, people come based on, hey, what's happening in this meeting. I really want to add input. I mean, they may come for other reasons also. Hey, I happen to be coming and thanking somebody, or, you know, like our public comment today was sort of on a lot of different topics. But definitely when there's an agenda item that draws public interest, people come. And they speak beforehand. But yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to also point out, like, the success of that program came through public comment in this format. I mean, that's a pretty, you can make a pretty easy correlation there. It's like, yeah, if it's important, it's a big deal, and it's something that we need to dive into further. Perfect example, like, she got done with her comment, Dr. Meyer went and spoke with her. We had and that galvanized the whole program. So it works, and I would also argue, like, if it's important enough and people are paying attention to what's coming up, like, you can come get a lot addressed in 3 minutes, and we're all available.
But, and they are speaking to agenda items. My thought was that they would have a chance, an option to speak after they've heard us discuss, which I think is important to some degree. So I guess my question, to modify this, like, what are we afraid of? It being cumbersome? Is that our, like, really only drawback? And being late, later in our night?
No, not all, in my own situation, not all 5,000 of my voters are able to be here.
Right, really?
And so you give the power of argument away from what are our constituents who aren't here emailing to us and the conversation that happens here, and then you've given it back over to just the few who are in the room, which are not to undermine the value of the few in the room. They are the ones who have free time, but there's a lot of people who aren't here for a variety of reasons. That it doesn't have anything to do with whether they really want to be here or not, more with that's because. And I would,
to that point, I just wanted to also remind the board, if there is an agenda item that which you have done before and said, hey, hey, we need to get some parent opinion or public opinion, several times I have sent it out, or we've done, like you said, the input forums or the feedback forums, but also if there's a policy that's going to affect the public that's on the agenda, we can send that out also. So we can also gather input so that more people are able to give input before you come to the board meeting and have all of that information, as long as the entire board has access to that. So I can certainly do that as well on any agenda item, just to be able to help you get a plethora of responses.
And the way it's working now with us bringing it up the next meeting, if there's a pointed topic, we don't just ignore it, we do act.
When we've needed to follow up on a public comment, the next meeting, I've done that several times where, hey, just add clarity to,
So if we are going to stay with what we have, I would really like to see that, just the only change would be that sentence, total time allotment for public comment will not exceed 30 minutes. I'd like to see that changed to an hour, because then we are always staying within our policy and not going outside of it.
So
it
that would
like
require motion number 3.
Point of order, this is not on your agenda as a first reading policy item.
Right, so that would be recommended motion number 3.
And that would be my only change, everything else looks good.
I see what you're saying.
Oh, you're saying bring it forward to
bring a first
bring it forward
reading
to a first reading,
For
so
a
we
first
can
reading next meeting.
Allowing
to
us
change
to make
to amend.
And I will just hear,
board policy.
is there a point of order?
I would, I'm sorry.
No.
Can you please?
If we're thinking that we want to bring policy 4105 forward for a first reading, we would still have opportunity to discuss the potential change.
Absolutely. That's at first reading, so
Yeah.
it's published,
We have
a
more
notice to
discussion
the
at first
constituents, and to not violate open meeting law, that you would want it to be published as a first read, and that's when you guys could discuss language in that policy.
See how many people come for public comment on that one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That'll be our litmus test.
If it's a,
Hey, internet.
But all of what we're discussing now, that has to be done in first reading.
yes.
Yeah, when any changes.
And that gives us a month
I do like,
to look into it.
Trustee Sherman's idea is, we could have 5 hours in for public comment today. Ms. Dodd is not going to speak for 5 hours. She was the only one who came up. So it doesn't really change the meeting whether or not the allotment of time is longer than 30 minutes.
If each speaker is still represented at 3 minutes, right? But when we get to some issues that are really passionate for parents, I would hope also that it isn't just in one meeting that we're hearing ideas. If it's something that is this big in the community, that we would want to be hearing it in other ways.
Oh, for sure.
I think with how much emphasis right now is on communication and interaction and hearing from the public, that this public comment wouldn't be their only avenue to reach out to us. And in fact, in the past, it has been very helpful. We hear from people in email. We hear from people who reach out to our superintendent, and then we hear about it. So there's a lot of avenues that the public gets into.
I would like to make a point that the recommended motion number 2, that we couldn't even do that.
Right, that does seem outside because it's a policy change.
It shouldn't even be here on our agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean for changing the policy on the fly?
Yeah. So I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to bring board policy 4105, public participation at board meetings for first reading.
A second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is there other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that motion passes. Where am I?
Consent agenda.
I'll hear a motion for consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, I make a motion that we table the consolidated board report. The reporting assistant could not produce this report, and their tech team is working on it.
A second.
Thank you. So this is an amendment to the
Amendment
point of
to
order,
the-
clerk. Correct. This is an amendment to the agenda.
Right.
All those, it's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now we can vote.
The
on-
amendment passes. Now
We can vote on the amended.
we can vote on the amended agenda.
Consent agenda.
Amended consent agenda.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the amended consent agenda.
Well, we already?
Is that what we're supposed to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Second.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Whew. Aye, that motion passes. So we haven't left any open motions on the table, right? We do have a first reading of a policy 41, two of them, 4175. And so I'm not presenting this one, this is just as in your packet. Are there any questions, comments, additions, changes?
So this is a first reading?
This
New
is the
policy.
first reading.
Yeah, because our policy goes future adoption.
Did we have something, so this is pretty much like a little syllabus of what we're handing out.
Yeah.
This is a new, yep.
Did we not hand like a handbook or something out before?
We have something we do with the admin team. You've probably seen where the checklist of what they have to cover. This is just putting it into policy. And you'll see the next policy we're reading is the 5265, which is on this list.
Is there any discussion on this?
This is a required, these are required annual notices. Do we have a reference for the requirement? What requires? Is it state code? That
Is
should
it
be-
different in each one?
That should be on our policy.
Well, each one of those
One
policies
is gonna have its own
has
code.
its
Yeah.
required.
But it seems like you're right. Is this policy implying that it's a requirement to hand these out? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
each of these is, if you look up the actual policies, it'll say
It'll
that you
tell
need to give annual notice.
what
So we're just
body
putting
is-
it in one spot.
Yeah, this is the reference to those,
So
so.
you were saying early
Well,
is
each
to
of-
put that policy or that reference on this. right?
Actually, they're not necessarily all the same, and this isn't, this is each of these are required. This little policy summarizing it is not necessarily required, which is why we haven't had it in the past. This summary.
Yeah.
This summary is incredibly helpful for our administrators, for
Exactly.
example. Over the
It's a
years,
useful tool.
it's an incredibly useful tool.
Right, so that we're adding it as policy without it needing this is required by federal or state law.
Right, because each of these is.
Within each of the
Strong.
policies listed there, it references its own
Just
requirement.
And
wanted to get that
Yeah.
clarified because all of our policies have those.
They do, and the next one we'll see at the end of it.
Yes.
Shows the.
So I think we need this as well. If this is required.
No.
correct?
This
This
is
list is not
preferred
required.
because of its usefulness as a reference tool.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a required by state law attached to just this one 4175. Does that make sense?
Trustee Decker, if I may, if I were to add code, I would have to get into all of these policies and add every
I
code that
understand.
it referenced.
I understand. So
Which I can.
for me, this is not a policy, this is a procedure.
Right, that's kind of what I was thinking.
That's where I'm going with this. It's more of a procedure that we provide to the administrators.
It's neat. It's a reference of, and I think it's in the right spot. I think it's in the right spot as a policy.
I don't disagree with, like, it's a procedural thing that, yes, this all needs to be done, but I guess my stance on it is, like, if this is a helpful tool to approve this policy and put it into practice, and it helps everybody, and we are within the power to make jobs easier by, you know,
It is a
He's just saying if it's in the right
recommended
spot.
policy, and it is helpful for constituents to be able to reference what are we supposed to do annually.
And I think we all agree we want it.
Well,
His
absolutely.
question is it in the right spot as
Is it?
policy or procedure? And it is in ISBA as policy.
Recommended policy.
Could we just add that wording in there, just so that as people look, they can read it very clearly, like, each one of these policies listed in this list are required annually, and you can find those requirements on
policy.
Yeah.
So cited on that policy.
Right, or yeah, so they're cited in the policy itself, or something. I don't know if it's worth it. I'm just saying as an idea.
I like it the way it is. Not that I haven't liked this discussion, but is there a need to get more verbose on this? It's just a reference tool.
That's cool.
Okay, that was first reading, and at this stage, if there's no other recommendations on that, we will look at the second first reading, which is policy 5265, employee responsibilities regarding student harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And everybody had this in their packet. The changes are, there's a highlighted change, superintendent or designee, and am I correct? Is that the only change on this one?
This is a new policy. First reading of a new policy. And you'll see if Dr. Meyer scrolls down.
Yeah, or designee.
Trustee Decker caught that after I published the packet, and it said up, and it should have said or. So I did just.
You made that.
There's already an additional.
It would have changed the whole meeting if it was the superintendent of the designee that was going to have to do this.
We got a student.
Oh, we had a student one, not.
We're supposed to have this one.
And that is we had this policy as, we still do, as student policy, and now this is the employee responsibilities.
And we're supposed to.
So I was reading it as if it was the policy we had. Thank you for the clarity there. Are there any questions on this policy? It read to me like it's drafted similar to.
It is, but it's we have to do
but from the
professional,
person.
and we have to do professional development annually.
Yeah. This is already what we do
in practice,
and now it's being put into policy to support it.
Yep. And here's the Idaho code that references right here.
Are there any other questions on this new policy? 5265? Okay. We'll have both of those second reading next meeting, I assume. We have administrative announcements. Is there any? It's thinned out.
Tasha from Washington, welcome back. And Baby Huck.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
We all got introduced.
Yes, this is Baby Huck. He opened his eyes.
Yeah.
This is my 6th day back to work.
There you go. Welcome back.
In the building back to work.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Are there any other announcements from schools?
There's
A
all my
successful
announcements,
week.
so
We did. We
You
saw
wanna hear
those
from
in
me.
action.
Yeah.
Well, first week back. Congrats. Okay. Okay. With that, meeting adjourned.